Hello, I'm Will Yeoman, CEO of Writing WA, and welcome to another episode of Pod Street. Today it's my great pleasure to introduce Jessica Mudditt from Hembury Books. Jessica's also a former journalist, and my goodness, she's done so much, and I'm looking forward to talking to her about that. But she's also an author of 2, soon 3 books. I notice one's coming out next year, and so much else besides. So, Jess, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, and I should remind listeners, we in fact chatted before on your own podcast, and that was very exciting.
Yeah, it was a fantastic episode. It was a really popular one, Will.
No, well, thank you. So, look, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Because I just don't even know where to start, to be honest.
Never mind. I was a journalist for 15 years, which I loved, but my first love has always been books, and I dreamed of being an author. I could not get a publisher or literary agent interested in my first book, which is an account of 4 years that I lived in Myanmar and worked as a journalist and watched, historic changes in a country that had had no expats really for 50 years. I was determined to publish that book, so I learnt how to self-publish and actually sort of fell in love with the process of, making. And then I was just so happy to, I had removed the torment of will I be able to publish a second book and all the other books I have planned. So very happily, continued writing my second book. And then last year, sadly, my dad passed away, and I had a moment just the next day where I thought, gee, life is really short, and why am I waiting to start my dream books business? Just give it a go. I know my dad would have encouraged me. So Hembury Books was born. That was the name of my dad's furniture business in our childhood home. So I kind of thought I was going to be a ghostwriter, like more of the writing books, but on the new website, I put up all the different ways that I could help authors. And one of those ways was, if ISBNs make your eyes glaze over, I can do that for you. And from day one, I got 2 clients because there are so many authors with finished manuscripts who can't get a publisher. And the first year we just did nonfiction because it was actually just me, not we. And that was my expertise. But slowly, I've added more people to the team. And as of last month, we now do fiction as well. So our authors are self-published. They keep all their royalties and they keep all their rights, but they have a team around them of people to make their creative vision come to life, from the cover to the way the book is typeset. Our goal is to delight authors.
Look, I was just thinking about the covers themselves, because that's been a bit of a, thing with me in self-publishing. They're not always that great, but yours are absolutely fantastic. So clearly you've got that sort of focus that, the books actually have to look good. You're not going to go very far if they don't actually look good on the shelf.
Yeah, it must look good. And a beautiful cover, I think, is a work of art.
Yes.
Worth spending time on getting that right. Absolutely. Yeah, so important.
Look, I am surprised that you couldn't find a publisher for your first book, and I'm amazed at it all sounds very adventurous. I mean, as you know, I used to be a travel writer, but I kind of tried to stick to the classic European river cruises and things, and not get out of my safety zone. But you've done some amazing stuff. Have you always had a taste for adventure in that regard?
Yeah, I think I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I always have been. I just, and I fell in love with Asia and ended up living there for 7 years after traveling there for a year. It's just cool. But interestingly, I interviewed Andrea Barton on the podcast last week for an upcoming episode. And I said to her, why did you get an American publisher? And she has lived abroad and her books are set abroad. She couldn't get an Australian publisher interested. And the feedback to her, which was similar to me, was that we're kind of interested in books with an Australian setting.
Oh,
interesting, huh?
It is really interesting, and again, I'm doubly surprised now. I just would have thought these kinds of books would really appeal, particularly to people who like to travel vicariously and don't have an opportunity to explore these cultures like you might have done.
Well, that's to me, the point of a book is to transport the reader.
Absolutely.
But of course, I'm going to say, this is a bit of risk aversion, isn't it? If you're trying to appeal to as many people as possible, it's safer to choose a book with Australian characters in an Australian setting.
Yeah. So, okay. So, in your role as publisher, then, how do you approach that when someone comes to you and says, "Like, I want to publish this book or that book," and you're thinking, is this going to sell in an Australian market? You know, how do you sort of negotiate that aspect of it?
Well, what I love about Hembury Books is that we're not gatekeepers of
Mm,
ideas.
mm.
Our business model does not rely on moving units.
Moving
It,
units,
it is
yeah.
we that's not our business model at all, because the author invests in the cost of producing their book.
Yes.
It is for Hembury Books, if the book sells 10 copies or 10,000 copies, it doesn't matter. We spend equal time on the book, the loving care that we give every book. And that means that the diversity of books that we can publish is unlimited, really. And I think that's the way that books should be. It's all very subjective. You never really know what's going to land. And an author who has invested in the cost of producing their book is going to be extremely determined to make their book a success. And they've got all the freedom to do that because they own all the IP. They don't have to buy copies off us. And equally, they keep the rewards of the fruits of their labour. Like, we take no royalties. I think
Mm.
that's pretty unique. And because we just think that authors deserve that.
You look, I think that's a wonderful attitude to take, and I'm wondering too. In this day and age, this actually goes back to a panel I recently did at the short story competition here in Perth, which was basically called DIY, Do It Yourself, and it was all about self-publishing. And one of the questions that came up was that the stigma surrounding self-publishing is that no longer the case?
Look, it's still around, and I was conscious of it of myself. For like the first year, I didn't ever say self-publishing out loud because I didn't want people to know that about my book.
Sure.
I feel so completely different about it now that I actually forget that there is stigma, and occasionally I brush up against it, and I'm like, oh, it's terrible. But I think the most authors are becoming so pragmatic that they're not even bothering to pitch to a trad publisher, or they
Wow.
really can. Yeah, they really can see the benefits, and it's preferable to be self-published. Financially, it's preferable. Creatively, if you can make the initial outlay in your book, you have a much better experience being in control of what your book looks like, and even the words. So there's a lot of authors who were previously traditionally published and have now come to self-publishing. And once you get a taste for it, it would be hard, I think, to go back and kind of to be shown your cover, or to be, told to wait 18 months to
Mm.
decide the fate of your book, whether it will even come out. It's just much more rewarding, I think, to do it this way.
Yeah. Look,
And what I love about self-published authors is that they back themselves. They don't need validation or permission, or that they're willing to push ahead, that the idea for their book burns inside them with so much
mm,
fire that
mm.
they need to get it out. And Virginia Woolf self-published. She and Leonard, they actually bought a printing press and self-published her first book because nothing was going to get in the way of her getting her books out. And
Yes.
that's kind of amazing authors that I get to work with all the time. And there are some authors who, if they can't get a traditional publisher interested, the book will never see the light of day because they won't contemplate doing it the other way. But I
Mm.
do think it's so much, because the reality is that you just can't, it's just virtually impossible, like, for a non-fiction memoir to get a deal. So you need to take matters into your own hands.
Yeah, and look, I think you're right. Just going back to what we said before about the product looking good, if you just nail that in terms of the cover and the layout and design and everything, then there really is no difference between that and a self-published book and a traditionally published book, apart from the fact that it's self-published.
Yeah, yeah, it should be indistinguishable.
Absolutely.
And even, this incredible level of care that goes into a self-published book, you're going to see the quality outshine a lot of traditionally published books. I know that's a
Mm.
controversial thing to say, but if you think about, the business model of a traditional publisher, the more time that they spend on each individual title, there is a cost to that. And not every book, I've heard authors say, it's been decided that their book wasn't going to be a runaway success. And from that moment, the care and attention kind of dropped away, because 20% of titles kind of carry the 80%. But with a self-published book, I have clients who will go, they'll say, look, this is the 6th time it's been edited, but I want it to be the best book it can be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the other thing I love too, you were talking about the passion of some of these self-published authors. We experience that a lot over here in Western Australia because we, as part of the organisation's services to members, we offer a free book launch event, and by far the majority of people taking us up on that offer are self-published authors, and they are the most passionate and the most lovely and down-to-earth people, and I just love working with them almost in preference. This is going to be controversial, but almost in preference to some of the traditionally published authors. That they're just wonderful, wonderful people.
Yeah, wonderful, because they see it. It's an investment and a business, and they're professional. And they have no airs and graces. I mean, some of them are earning really big bucks, but they did that because they're savvy business people. And I think when you approach it like that, the expectations are just so different compared to when someone offers you something for which you have not paid.
Yeah.
You just treat things differently. It's just different. It's like you win a holiday versus you saved for that holiday.
Oh yeah, it has value, doesn't it? It's meaningful value.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You going back to what you were saying, because about the kinds of different services you offer. If we just look at what's on the website, and I'll remind people now, it's hemburybooks.com.au. You've got self-publishing services, which we've been talking about, book editing, audiobooks, and one-on-one book coaching sessions. I'm really interested to find out more about those.
Yeah, so we can help authors at any stage of their journey. So that's where, you've conceived of an idea for a book, but you're not sure how to begin and it feels overwhelming, or having sort of an accountability coach, to read over your chapters as you write. So Hembury Books has a coach, edit, publish model. We can pick up completed manuscripts or even published manuscripts. But if you're at the beginning of your journey or you're stuck midway through the writing, I provide one-on-one book coaching sessions of 50 minutes. So, doing really important things like getting clear on your chapter summaries, the overarching message of your book. It can be nice as well if you're writing memoir to have someone to talk about, like, should I mention all aspects of my life? I'm not comfortable revealing some things. So it's really, I find it, people feel really motivated knowing that someone is waiting for their next chapter to arrive.
Yeah, look, I think that's another beautiful aspect of this whole process. You mentioned before, at this stage now, you've got a bit of a team. I mean, so how much are you really hands-on now?
I'm still very hands-on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very hands-on, and it shall always be that way because I love working with authors. But what we have is specialists. So we have a couple of cover designers. We have an amazing typesetter in Pakistan called Sahil, who's going to come on the podcast. We have Rizal in Bangladesh, who makes book trailers for our clients, which are really amazing. And the social media designs. We have May in the Philippines doing the podcast and handling different aspects. And then we have Suze, who is Australia's #9 Goodreads reviewer, who shares the hosting because we do virtual book launches. And so we're sort of, there's aspects of each author's journey that they have with someone in Hembury Books.
Yeah.
While there's always myself or Meg who is looking after them from end to end. It's a very close relationship.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And that's something that certainly big publishers, traditional publishers, just don't offer authors. I mean, I know some of the smaller independent presses do. You get that very close personal relationship with your editor, for example, and it's such a satisfying experience, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I didn't even mention the editors, but something that we do is when your book is going to be edited by Hembury Books, I set up a 3-way meeting with the author, the editor, the publisher. So the author can introduce themselves to the editor, tell them about their book, and if there's anything specifically they'd like them to look at, and then the editor explains how they work, because it can be quite intimidating to be edited, especially for the first time if no one's read it. And I think that that 30-minute meeting just builds up rapport and trust and gives the editor a sense of the person that the author is, and they come to the job with a lot of empathy as well. And it's just, I love seeing my editor's eyes light up when the author starts talking about their book. And, intellectually, they're like, oh, this is so interesting. And it's just one.
Do you still find a little bit of pushback sometimes? Because I know there are some self-published authors who just don't like being edited, basically.
Well, and my mantra is that we get out of author's way.
Okay.
And that's what we do. We are not going to rip into your work and say that character needs to be removed, don't like the ending, rewrite. Our approach is that the author does know best. This is what we want to do, is help them bring their creative vision to life in a beautiful book.
Right.
And there are suggestions, and I always give professional advice, but unless it's a legal matter, it is advice only. And, if we say, I don't understand the title, like, do you think another title would be better? I have found that the authors will say, no, this is the title that I want. And then in retrospect, I've been like, you know what, they were right. I mean, this is so subjective. Our goal is to make it the best book it can be, and our editors are incredible with the level of detail. But it is advice to be taken, and it remains the author's decision.
Yeah,
in aspect, whether it's the cover or the font or whatever, because that, for me, that's our unique, our USP in the market.
Look, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and clearly that's certainly not the case in traditional publishing, where you have very little control over, in fact, all of those things.
Yeah, look, I'm an author, so I come at this from being an author, a strong author myself. And I don't like my editor, Lauren. She's a light touch editor, and that's why I go back to her for every book.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, I guess, though, you've got the advantage of having been a journalist for so long. There are probably a lot of first-time authors who probably just need a little bit more help, encouragement. And I guess, as you've already said, you can just offer suggestions. You don't have to make it like a thing, really, do you?
No. And I mean, the other thing we do is we work really closely together on the blurb, because about the author, that takes a lot of care. And I use my journalism skills. I'll say to the author, please draft 250 words, send it to me. I'll have a go editing it, and Meg will also have a go. And then we'll send it back to the author, and they can approve or reject the changes. And most of the time, they're delighted, but they write the first draft.
No, that sounds fantastic. Just staying on the subject of your being a journalist, I'm wondering how that has helped shape the way you write. And, we hear all those famous stories about authors like Ernest Hemingway, who started out as journalists, and it really shaped their voice.
Yeah, I think because I trained in London, I was accredited with the National Council for the Training of Journalists, and we had a really schooling of shorthand, law and news writing, and it was brutal. It was a very difficult course just to pass, and it set me up for life, because these golden rules, I think, of good, clear writing that gets to the point, that's economical, but it's playful and it's not stilted and formal. All of those things still help me every day. Because a book title is a headline, a blurb is a news report. You could say, you've got to put the good stuff up the top. And then, of course, it is different, as it's applied to books. But I think just keeping, it's funny, isn't it, how it's so hard to write simply. That I think one of the most common mistakes I see with authors is that they don't write the way they speak. It's sort of this, overly formal and overly complex. Sentences are too long. It's often that sort of thing, which is just, making it, because my goal is to make our books accessible to the reader. That's really important. And that's everything from, can you read the font on the cover, or is there a distracting background, or any of our social media? And, is the language as simple as it can be? And do the chapters make logical sense? Because ultimately we're doing all of this for the readers. Yeah. And we want the author to be imparted. So yeah, journalism has definitely helped, because that's the main goal of journalism, isn't it? It's not poetry, it's not conceptual or beautiful, it's sort of matter of fact, I think.
Yeah, and well, it's clarity of communication, isn't it? They want to get the message through in the most efficient way possible.
It is, yeah. Yeah. And I still love doing the podcast because it gives me a chance to interview people. So I get to keep flexing that muscle.
Of course, yeah, that makes complete sense. Now, audiobooks. I notice you offer an audiobook service. How is that going? I mean, I'm always curious to know, because I know so many people are really into podcasts and audiobooks nowadays.
Yeah, no, that's going well. So for example, the author of What If, Bronwyn Fraser, she's just finished recording her audiobook. So we do it a little bit differently in that I post the microphone. I do a couple of calls just setting up the author with the recording system, and they can record from the comfort and privacy of their own home at the pace that they wish, using one of our microphones. And then Bronwyn has sent me back her chapter files of her book that she's read out. And then I sent them to our sound producer in Pakistan, who then packages it all up and edits it. And then Bronwyn will receive her royalties from Find Away Voices, who distribute to all the podcast platforms like Audible, Spotify, Apple.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
really good. Do it for a fraction of the cost that you would pay, like with my first audiobook, I spent over $5,000 in a studio.
Wow.
Which, when I invested already in putting out the paperback and ebook, a lot of and the publicity, a lot of authors don't then have another $5,000 for audiobooks, and we know that they're so popular. So this is our workaround way that we think has a lot of great advantages.
Oh, absolutely. I think that sounds fantastic. I'm also wondering now, just if we sort of zoom out a bit and speak more broadly, the whole book publishing industry, and just talking about that other big question that's been on people's minds for what feels like probably almost decades now, but the apparent decline in reading books, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, and also hard copy versus ebooks as well. Where are you guys sitting on this at the moment?
Well, I think it's more books are being published than ever, than at any point in history. And this desire to tell our stories in book form, not just orally, goes back to the time when we learnt to write. And there is still, I would argue, no greater status measure than having written a book or books. Like, I always find it interesting when really accomplished people, Stephen Fry was on the radio interviewed on ABC Sydney the other day.
Okay.
And the guy said to him, "You have done so much with your life," and reeled off a list of like mind-boggling achievements. "What are you most proud of?" And he said, "My books."
Wow.
Because, I communicate ideas most importantly to me, and it's my books. And if you look like, on Instagram and stuff, it's all the famous person, often they're holding their book. Like, it's really just, we love this. And so I still believe readers love books. 4 million books are coming out every year, and that number will only increase as it gets easier to put them out. And yes, I know we're still we're competing with, streaming and all the other things we can do for entertainment. But I still think books are so beloved to people, and they provide so much joy, and that will never go away. And the format may change. Like, I love my Kindle because I can highlight passages and email them to my
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the light of a Kindle, but I also have a massive bookshelf of books. So
it doesn't have to be either or, does it?
no, it doesn't. I just think what I think is problematic is how we're giving readers books. I don't think bricks and mortar bookstores work. That is probably an industry in decline, and no one is really benefiting from that model. Like, not the publisher, because the publishers are going out of business. Definitely not the author. The booksellers are struggling. It's just that whole idea of printing books on paper, sending them to a shop, and then if they don't resell, they get driven back and potentially pulped. I think we have to do better than that. Even if that's like digital catalogues in a bookstore, I'm not sure, but I hope to be part of that disruption.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
because it has to be a better business deal for, I think, for everyone involved in that. And something there is not working. We know revenues are declining there. So, and then I think it's this vicious cycle where publishing decisions become more and more conservative and risk averse to try and find a bestseller, and readers are not getting what they deserve, which is true diversity of ideas, of, courageous, risky,
Yes.
thought-provoking ideas in esoteric books, that no one has heard of. That's kind of what I would like Australia's book industry to be like.
Yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right. I think this whole idea of it's almost like, look, it's obviously it's a business. You're running a business at the end of the day. But that being said, you can't be in that position where you just are not willing to, as you say, promote that diversity of voices. I mean, it's just, this is what readers want. This is what the authors want. If you're not doing that, then it's the wrong model, basically.
I mean, if we look at the way music is distributed or films are distributed, there's been massive upheavals. We do not go to Blockbuster and rent a DVD anymore, and yet the bookstore, for the most part, is still the central model. And I just think that, and the ability to provide your work direct to the consumer is, with social media and just in so many industries. So why is publishing not adapting?
Not the same. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's very complex, but I would like to, because, say what you will about TikTok, but what I love about it is that it's real people saying real stuff without filters and things.
Yes.
And who is popular, they're authentic, and they've got actual ideas that they're spreading. And I think books must do that too. We don't want to be trotting out the same stuff, the same safe historical genres and whatnot, with the same characters appearing again and again.
Yeah, look, I agree. You really have to advance the art form. So, look, Jess, if I may, maybe as a final question, I'd love to know what you're reading now, what you enjoy reading, if indeed you have time to keep up with your own reading list.
Yeah, I never stop.
Good.
I never stop. Because I started a business, I'm obsessed with founder stories. So I'm currently reading No Rules Rules, the story of Netflix.
Oh, wow.
And I've read Ride of a Lifetime, the Disney story, and I read the One-Page Marketing Plan. I just am gobbling up these books. And I've also, for people who love reading but lack the time, Speechify has changed my life. So it's about $200 a year, and it converts any PDF, any document, any email into audio. And you can choose the celebrity, so like Snoop Dogg or Gwyneth Paltrow, or just an Aussie accent, male, female. So every time I'm driving now, I'm listening to a book, and you can speed it up. So I think I've saved like 40 hours last month or something. That's how I can read my clients' books within a week and say, great, fantastic. I have read your book, and what about that for the blurb? So Speechify is amazing.
Oh, look, I agree with you, and I think there are a lot of similar platforms out there. I use another one, and just if I'm washing the dishes or something, I just plug in, and it's fantastic. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, look, Jess, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, and as listeners will now know, having heard about everything you do, you just do so much. Do you ever get sort of exhausted? I mean, how do you keep it all up?
Well, I've got a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Oh, my God.
No downtime. But no, I'm a high energy person. My life feels purposeful, so it's really nice.
And that gives its
really
own energy, doesn't it? Yeah. I can understand that. So just remind people about, we've mentioned the website, hemburybooks.com.au, but how can people find your podcast easily?
Yes, so just Hembury Books podcast, we have a website as well for that, so you can subscribe on your favourite platform. So just pop that into Google, or just go onto YouTube, and please subscribe.
I do. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Jess. Well, you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks a lot for talking to me, Will. See you.